The World Bank says debt burden of least developed countries continue to climb, hit $744 billion in 2019. Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning Zainab Ahmed will this morning present a breakdown of the 2021 budget proposal. President Buhari assures Okonjo-Iweala of support in the last lap of the World Trade Organization race. Plus, on the heels of the ongoing World Bank and IMF annual meetings in Washington, D.C., the focus of our conversation this morning is on the burden of debt and financial prudence of least developed countries. This is Business Express and it is reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Leah Katun Baba Tunde. Now, to the business of the day, the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, will in a few minutes be presenting a breakdown of the 2021 budget proposal. The event it has already an invitation, the diplomatic community, civil society organizations and the general public. And of course, it's going to be a virtual event and we will be bringing you details as it unfolds. Nigeria will not only explore every opportunity but deploy its entire energy towards ensuring that Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala becomes the next Director General of the World Trade Organization, WTO. President Muhammadu Buhari gave the assurance while granting audience to the former Minister of Finance and Economy who paid him a courtesy visit. State House correspondent Adamu Sambo now reports.
Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala is one of the two remaining candidates contesting for the top position of the multilateral institution, the World Trade Organization. She is here to express formal appreciation to President Muhammadu Buhari and indeed Nigeria for supporting her staunchly. For President Buhari, Dr. Okonjo-Iweala deserved every support to get the top job because of her profile and diligence in serving the country and the world, while assuring her that Nigeria will do all that it can towards ensuring that she emerges the Director General of the World Trade Organization. The President said more phone calls will be made and letters sent to some world leaders for more support. Dr. Okonjo-Iweala, a renowned development economist, had told the President that she feels very proud of Nigeria. She said with the presidential endorsement and support, the Chief of Staff to the President, as well as Ministers of Foreign Affairs and that of Industry, Trade and Investment, have been working round the clock to ensure that she succeeds. The former Minister of Finance also appreciated ECOWAS leaders for their endorsement, mentioning in particular the outstanding contributions of President Muhammadu Isufu of Niger, as well as President Alhassan Ouattara of Cote d'Ivoire. She asked President Buhari to make one final push within the week to beat the Koreans and bring the position to Nigeria. As the former managing director of the World Bank puts it, Mr. President, put a smile on my face. From the State House, Adamu Sambu.
Now, the World Bank is saying that global debt burden of least developed countries have continued to climb as recent data released in the latest edition of International Debt Statistics report shows that least developed countries' debt has hit $744 billion in 2019. This is as the bank fears there will be a higher increase in debt profile of countries occasioned by the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is the highest figure in its nearly 70 years history as rising public debt levels become a source of global concern, particularly in many of the world's poorest countries. According to the 2021 IDS report, the total external debt of debt service suspension initiative, eligible countries climbed 9.5% in 2019 from the previous year, highlighting an urgent need for creditors and borrowers alike to collaborate to stave off the growing risk of sovereign debt crisis triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. The report shows that the pace of debt accumulation for these countries was nearly twice the rate of other low and middle-income countries in 2019. The debt stock of DSSI eligible countries to official bilateral creditors, composed by mostly G20 countries, reached $178 billion in 2019 and accounted for 17% of long-term net debt flows to low and middle-income countries. Professor Ken Ife is a development economist, and of course he is a man of many feathers to his cap, and he joins me this morning, and together we shall be looking at issues around debt and financial prudence as the annual meetings begin in Washington, D.C. by the World Bank and the IMF, bearing in mind the consequences of COVID-19. You're welcome, sir, to Business Express this morning.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now having seen the rising debt levels globally, around the world, Nigeria inclusive, do you see pumping in more debts into economies as a solution or a problem in this recovery drive?
First is the rise is unexpected because the rapid rise is connected with the COVID incidents. And we haven't found a cure, and we haven't found a solution. So we're still awaiting. But meanwhile, the pressure on all the economies you mentioned is still climbing. So I cannot see an immediate end to the borrowing, because if you don't have savings and you have lots of things to spend money on, especially when it comes to health, you have no choice than to borrow. But obviously there's a story behind it, that there has to be prudence in the borrowing, there has to be transparency, and there has to be accountability. And Nigeria is well prepared because we have an subsisting 2007 FRA Act that organizes us with institutional framework, which is the FRC, to make sure that we comply, we get people to comply. It's not always the same with many of these countries. Many of them don't even have an enabling law to organize the borrowings. But is inevitable.
Okay, now still remaining at home now, and thankfully, of course, we have the IFRC in place. What will be your take on Nigeria's borrowing plan? Now, we've seen rising debts also in Nigeria, and in some minutes, the minister will be giving a breakdown on, of course, the debt proposal for 2021.
Nigeria, first of all, we are under-leveraged when it comes to borrowing. I know people are scared, but what they are scared of is our ability to repay. Internally, we have our own internal benchmark of about 25% debt to GDP. We're only around 20 now, and the conventional wisdom in international balance is 40%. So we have considerable headroom in terms of borrowing. And there's a necessity to borrow because we have the crisis, but also the infrastructure. They are necessary to attract investment, either domestic or foreign. You've got to have the infrastructure. And we have serious gap on transport infrastructure and road and all of that. But having said that, where the crisis lie, or where there is fear of possible fiscal meltdown, is on the debt service to government revenue. And that is, in fact, that has come down on the new budget. It was over 50% last year. Now it's 41% this year. So it's climbing down for some reason. But that is where it is. And but you also have to match this with the fact that Nigeria is the lowest tax to GDP in West Africa. We're about 6-7% of our tax revenue to GDP. Ghana is 18%. The whole of West Africa average 15%. South Africa 22%. So we are so far away in increasing tax to buttress revenue. And I know why the government is slowing that, because we are a low tax constituency, and you don't want to tax away and send away all the companies that are giving you the revenue. So we are getting there, but there's some pain that we are having to take, but we're inevitably moving in the right direction.
Okay, so we've also had the issues around this same borrowing concerns from people saying that, oh, this is sort of another colonization, because these big economies and multilaterals keep borrowing, and then you see nations just borrowing away. What will be your take on that?
Well, what you are saying is true to some extent, but it is something that is attributable to China's type of contract that they are giving out, and where there are some substantial waiver of sovereign immunity in the contract. So that is a huge concern. And I know we've experienced one of them on the 400 or something, but we have our eyes wide open to make sure that we scrutinize any future contracts to ensure that we don't sell our sovereign rights. So that's very big concern. But it's not the same. You can't have that on the multilateral development banks. You know, the World Bank, ADB, they're not in that sort of game. And they scrutinize what they are lending you money to. They know that there is FRA law that talks about debt sustainability against particular, and then also making sure that what you are borrowing the money for is capable of it. So they know all that. And so they take part in disbursement. No objection. They follow. They go and monitor. Okay, but you don't have that stringent regime with bilateral loans.
Okay, now back to the multilateral lenders you spoke about. There's also the concern of the conditionalities that come with these loans they give to nations that have popped up here and there. Also in Nigeria, we're having people raise those sort of concerns. Now, some schools of thought
not
say,
like the IMF conditionalities, or that's a different ball game.
Of course.
But there are some that are useful, because, you know, what business do you really have, for example, subsidizing petroleum products? You don't subsidize consumption. You subsidize production. You take money and subsidize those who are going to be producing the refined products, 75 licenses, rather than take 1 trillion and then use it to subsidize consumption that you have no control over, and many of those products are crossing the border. You are subsidizing some other person. So it doesn't make sense. So we have to come to terms with those. And the government-owned refineries are just not working. And so what do you want to do? Instead of taking $3 billion and giving it to go and reactivate government-owned refineries, give that as loan to 30 modular refineries, and they will give you more fuel, and then revamp the economy, create more jobs and more downstream. So that's a more sensible way to go about this.
Now also there's the argument that nations should develop their homegrown solutions rather than go with the multilaterals. Do you see that as a reasonable argument?
I'm not sure, because it takes two to tango. You are asking them to give you the money. They have an obligation to make sure you are capable of paying that money back to the countries that gave them the money. It's not their money. These are monies given by regional members to them to lend. And you say to them, just give me the money and I want to do what I want to do. It doesn't quite work that way. You have to show to them that you are actually doing what is necessary to enable you repay this money, build the capacity to repay the money. Some people have the capacity to the raw materials, the food, everything, but they don't have the management capacity. So they front load management capacity development in the initial 6 months of the program. So there are, and the monitor and evaluation framework to ensure that you're actually going to monitor and do the things that you say you're going to do. If you don't, they stop the money, you know. So I'm not sure, you know. And then of course, it works both ways. Wise, for example, CBN has said, okay, I'm going to build this power base by another 7.5 trillion. I'm making money available for people to come and invest in solar and all of that. But investors are not going to come and take that money, even though it's now saying, come and take it. They won't take it if the correct price is not being charged on electricity. Because you just go and take loan, you will never be able to repay. Do you understand what I'm saying? So the correct price has to be paid so that the people will invest and take the risk. If not, then you're going to have challenges.
Okay, so there's also the campaign on debt forgiveness for low-income countries. What will be your take on that?
But it's necessary.
It's also another issue at the ongoing
No, that's necessary. I mean, they're beginning to do that. And it's on the IMF and what they've all moved in that direction but what I've been hearing is really more about the debt service rather than the capital. Do you know what I mean? So they are having a lot of moratorium pushback on those, forgiving some. Is inevitable because you have to help. If they don't help us, then we won't be able to help them because of the structure of the international trade.
Now, on the back of this, we're still having countries borrow. We have some of our African countries borrowing away almost the size of their GDP, just borrowing away. So how do we lay that alongside the forgiveness?
Let me explain. Whilst the international best practice is 40% of GDP, you're borrowing, there are countries, I mean, Japan is over 120%. America is about 90%. The UK, all this Ireland, but Cape Verde is 150%. The fact is this, many of the countries that defy that benchmark and borrow more have infrastructure. And once you have infrastructure, you can defy those. But we don't have much infrastructure. So we have to worry about the level of our borrowing. Secondly, many of the countries borrowing have revenue, government revenue sufficient to enable them continue to service the debt. But we don't. We don't have enough revenue.
So that's sort of a
so
crisis
see,
for us,
we have two major constraints on Nigerian side. But many of the countries that are violating this and creating, they have money enough because they're exporting and getting foreign exchange to enable them pay back the foreign exchange that they are borrowing. But we don't have. The only one that gives us foreign exchange, 90%, is oil. And oil is neither here nor there. So that's where we need to rebalance the economy to enable more inflow into the forex regime.
Okay, so how do we as a country now ensure that there is prudence in the putting to work these monies we're borrowing?
Well, this is why I said that first of all we have an enabling law, fiscal responsibility at 2007, and it created an institution, Fiscal Responsibility Commission, that actually oversees. It's his job to oversee that at the federal level, state level, and local government level. It has that. There's no other organization that, even the revenue mobilization, doesn't have that. That is their job. So we need to support this organization, because I have actually gone round with them to some MDAs to talk to them, build their capacity on prudence and the transparency and accountability. So that's the organization you need to support. Now, 60 of them have been put into the budget. You got to support FRC to go out and build the capacity of this organization to diversify their revenue, to do more fiscal stability in terms of how they operate, and then remit the appropriate money using the operating surplus template into the consolidated revenue fund. That is a very major job. We need to bring this company out, this FRC, back it with law, not law, with resources, to be able to police these organizations and make sure that we are able to pay back our debts.
Okay, so still talking about paying back our debts and making the Fiscal Responsibility Act work for Nigeria. The president just days back, when he was presenting the budget to the National Assembly, he made mention of government-owned enterprises, as you have also rightly pointed out, playing their role in ensuring they remit those those revenues they collect.
Correct.
Do you see this making Nigeria reduce her revenue burden to a very sizable?
But the organization that has the responsibility to enforce it, which is the FRC, doesn't have protection of its revenue, doesn't have protection, doesn't have enough teeth to bite. In other words, enforcement and then penalties and all of that. And some of those amendments are in the new act that they are going to pass. That is what will give it more teeth. Because if you don't have punitive measures and compliance, then people they'll be doing what they like to do. So they need more. They need more teeth to enforce, and then also make sure that they have resources. Their budget is about the lowest of all the NDAs. The person to enforce you is not going to come and beg you to fund it. It's a very sorry situation.
Yes.
And at the same time, they're even not sure whether they are going to get merged with any other. It's so unbelievable. That's where we need to put our faith right now, so that it gets the business done now.
Thank you, Prof. So I guess all eyes will now be
on FRC to do the job.
To do the job.
Because they also, even state governments wanting to borrow, there has to be debt sustainability tests for these people. So even making sure that we are borrowing the right money for the right purpose and being sustainable, it's all part of their job with Debt Management Office.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Ken Ife. Thank you for coming on the program. Now, let's move on. The National Free Trade Action Committee, managers of Nigeria's interest in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, says for a nation to trade in its produce and products, it needs preferential access to markets. Mohamed Kolo reports that the visit to NTA it is in order to utilize NTA's wide reach as Nigeria takes advantage of opportunities in the free trade initiative ahead of its takeoff in January.
About export trade, it is about non-oil export. It's about diversifying our exports so that we reduce the impact of fluctuation in oil price that has had a cyclical effect on our economy.
We are committed to giving you publicity. Anything that is a government policy that is for the good of the country, NTA will continue to give it the necessary drive and the push for it to succeed.
So that you take opportunity and see how you can reach out to all stakeholders. In the first place, to inform, that is to sensitize the general public, and also to see how you can now make them understand and also fall in line with the noble objectives of this body. It is very, very paramount.
As the impact of the coronavirus continues to affect industries, harsh market conditions are affecting transportation and the businesses around them. Now, Moplang Dakok visited some transport companies in Abuja and brings us this report on how transporters are surviving COVID-19.
Surviving COVID-19 series is brought to you in partnership with the Central Bank of Nigeria.
Before the pandemic, a drive to the popular Utako area where many transport companies operate would reveal a very busy atmosphere. But today the story is different, even with the lockdown eased almost completely. Some of the transporters say the cessation of movement, the reduction in consumer spending, and the fact that schools are still closed is taking a toll on the transportation sector.
No, we resumed, I think, if I'm correct, on the 3rd of July. 3rd of July, it was slow, very slow. We load up to 10 to 5 buses every day. But since then, sometimes even to load a bus is a problem. So up till now, it hasn't picked up.
Now, fewer passengers have to be picked in compliance with the social distancing. The implication is higher cost of transportation.
We have to raise the fare due to the way they say we should be loading people. Formerly, we do go with 7, 8. Now they bring it down to 5 because of the issue of COVID. And the price have to go up to 10 or 11,000, depending on how we get some people. Due to the transport issue, now people don't normally travel anymore. They're even likely to go and hang somewhere in Gwagwala to get a lift down to East. Who they can even afford of 4,000, 3,000 to enter a truck or by just to pass by a Zeros bus.
The transport companies say many Nigerians are now beginning to utilize the use of waybills to send goods across the country as opposed to traveling.
People have other means now of traveling, as in trying to use the waybill session more than going personally. That is a problem we're having now.
Surviving COVID-19 series is brought to you in partnership with the Central Bank of Nigeria.
Now, from the stock market, the stocks lost some 40.67 billion naira as trading began this week. The NSE All-Share Index dropped by 0.27% Monday, while market capitalization closed at 14.811 trillion naira. Market turnover was negative as volume moved down by 3.9%. The market is already dropping marginally as trading session opens this morning. Next is a brief on the performance of markets around the globe as put together by Boss Abel.
On the global scene, Trading in Hong Kong was suspended on Tuesday due to Typhoon Naka, while other Asia-Pacific markets were mixed. Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing announced Tuesday that the trading in the security and derivative markets, including after-hours futures trading, have been cancelled for the full day due to the typhoon. Mainland Chinese stocks were mixed earlier as the Shanghai Composite shared 0.3%, while the Shenzhen component added 0.183%. U.S. stock futures fell in early morning trading on Tuesday as investors wait for the first batch of corporate earnings. Dow futures fell 0.88%. S&P 500 futures and Nasdaq 100 futures both traded in marginally negative territory. In Europe, the pan-European stocks 600 hovered around the flat line at the start of trading, with travel and leisure stocks falling 1%, while utility gained 0.5%. Africa stocks were mostly positive on Monday and started in mixed territory this Tuesday as markets around the globe await updates on the U.S. stimulus package. Boss De Able, Business Express.
And it is on that note that we end this edition of Business Express. Remember, we value your feedback, so keep the mails and messages coming with your questions and suggestions. You can communicate with us on Twitter, and you can also catch up with us on YouTube on the NTA's channel. Business Express returns tomorrow at 3 p.m. Remember to stay safe, wash your hands, and keep safe distances. My name is Leah Katung. Baba Tunde.